Welcome to the Keys to the City podcast, where the kingdom enables your success. I'm your host, Christian Graham. Welcome today with Nico Barraza. Go ahead and say hi, Nico.
Hey, everybody. Christian, thank you so much for having me, buddy.
Yeah, no, definitely. And Nico, for those of you that don't know, has his own podcast, Starve the Ego, Feed the Soul. Mm-hmm. Talk to me a little bit about what Starve the Ego, Feed the Soul, you know, where it started from, what it means to you, and also just highlight it.
Yeah, thanks, dude.
Talk about it.
Open the show up with a plug for my show. I love it. Thank you.
Yes.
So Starve the Ego, Feed the Soul was sort of a brainchild that came up during COVID, you know, when kind of the world shut down. I was a retired ex-pro athlete after being in this really big cycling crash, went back to school and got a second master's in clinical mental health counseling. And I've always been a very deep thinker, had deep conversations with people from all walks of life throughout my life, even as a really young kid. And a couple of friends of mine were like, hey, you should start a podcast. And every other millennial, I was like, I don't know. It's a pretty saturated market. And this was in 2020. And I have a, audio video background like we were discussing off air. And just went for it, just started it. I've always loved that tagline, Starve the Ego, Feed the Soul. And it's just really, the whole impetus of the show is really to have deeper conversations about the entirety of the human experience, whether that be interpersonal relationships, psychology, science, spirituality, everything, right?
Yeah.
Really my personal tagline for the brand is just the most important subject you'll ever study in your entire life is yourself.
Right? Yeah.
Since then it's been a hiatus for probably about 6 months because I've had multiple shoulder surgeries here in San Diego. But before then, it was trending in the top 1% for self-help on Apple and Spotify, and had a bunch of really big name people on there, and some people that we spoke about very like not famous at all, but had incredibly powerful stories, very well spoken. It's honestly a blessing just starting to get that going as well too. Had my first recording in a while 2 days ago.
Wow.
So launching thank you. Launching a new show, as a lot of work goes in this in the back end.
Yes.
Launching a new episode this coming week. So excited and blessed to be doing it again.
Yes, man. Yeah, I'll definitely keep that in prayer for you, that everything goes well. Make sure you go and check out Starve the Ego, Feed the Soul with Nico. Going to be releasing new episodes coming out very soon, possibly out of the MK Lab for the shows here in San Diego, possibly. You're from Arizona. Mm-hmm. Yes, yep. Born and raised in Arizona. Yep. And so you said something about growing up in the barrios of Arizona. Yep. Talk to me a little bit about what that means. Yeah, dude. What is that?
I love that you asked me this because I've spoken about this on my show a little bit, and I love where I'm from. I'm very, very much loyal to my upbringing and the cultures I was raised in. So I was born, into a single mom, right? My dad was never involved in my life, and he's full Irish. My mom is Hispanic and Native. And so grew up primarily in the Mexican culture on the West Side barrios in Tucson, Arizona, which at the time were middle, lower income. It's a little more uppy now. And then, before I was even born, it was, pretty much just ghetto area, right?
Yeah, yeah.
And so I grew up in this sort of melting pot of gangs and, lots of sports like baseball, soccer that were big, and I grew up in a very just diverse part of Tucson. And I love it. One of the things I always bring up is the little league I played on. Honestly, one of the best in the state. And it's just all a bunch of mostly Mexican kids that just grew up playing ball. And grew up different broken families and different walks of life, different socioeconomic backgrounds, and just that kind of summarizes, my childhood. It was just very diverse. Grew up around a Black population, grew up around the white population too, and I felt very blessed to grow up in an area that showed me different cultures, different languages. And it's just what's the word? I always, although I don't really want to live in Tucson. Maybe I will eventually, but I always, when I return, it feels like a sense of home and a sense of pride, just because it reminds me of. I guess the beautiful parts of my childhood that were just spent, playing a lot of sports, building a lot of relationships. I played a lot of card games growing up too. I was super nerd. I loved,
What card games?
So I played Pokemon, I played Magic the Gathering. I still play Magic when I'm older too.
Nice.
I played the Dragon Ball Z card game.
Okay.
I played all the nerdy stuff, dude. Whether it was Halo or World of Warcraft, I was so just such a nerdy kid on top of the athlete. And so I would go to a card stop. My mom would drop me off when I was 9 or 10, and I just hang out with adults all day and just trade cards, speak, and that honestly taught me a lot about what I use now in podcasting, just how to communicate and relate to people from a lot of different walks of life.
Wow. I can definitely relate. I knew something was gonna really bring us together. Yeah, growing up, man, I played a ton of card games, all the way from 7 years old to probably, I mean, early in my 20s. I'm 28 now, so like earlier on, before I had my wife and kids, and everything. And we would go out every single Friday and Saturday growing up, from like 7 to 15 years old, would be going down south to National City to this Comic Odyssey. It's a card shop down there, and we play tournaments. We would end up going to then like playing regional tournaments and what was called Shonen Jumps for Yu-Gi-Oh.
Oh,
and
Yu-Gi-Oh! I played that. Sorry, I don't know why I spaced on that. I played that.
Yeah. So me and my brother, grew up playing Yu-Gi-Oh. Yu-Gi-Oh actually released when I was 7 years old. Okay. And so we went and got like our Joey starter pack and things like that. Like, I'm like flashing back right now. This is amazing.
Blue Eyes White Dragon.
Yes.
Right? I remember that card when I was like a kid.
Right.
Yeah. That's so funny, dude.
And so it took a whole nother turn of like depth of like playing the card game. We went to tournament on tournament, and my brother actually ended up being number 1 in California at one point.
Oh, so you guys were legit players.
Oh yeah.
So Yu-Gi-Oh! I was not good at.
Yeah.
But Magic I was good at. But Yu-Gi-Oh! I just liked the cards, but I was not. I don't think I'm a good Yu-Gi-Oh! player. But it was cool to see people that knew what they were doing.
Oh yeah, no, we were on game, man. Like, he won scholarship money. He's
That's so cool, dude.
And then it eventually for him moved into like, he went to Japan during the pandemic, and won, like, he got like 3rd place in this Teppen tournament, which was a online card game eventually, and he won like 50 grand from that. And
dude, let's go.
And I'm like, yo, like, why didn't you like start streaming and all this stuff? But he's a totally different personality from myself. Like, I'm very much an entrepreneur, like doing different things. He's like one of the greatest strategists that I know. And he's so in love with his work, and he's a manufacturing engineer doing, extremely well on his job and things like that. So I definitely don't knock that hustle either, because that's a means for another person as well. And I think that we have a lot of different ways that we can walk in life, and we all can come into alignment at some point about certain things, where it could be as simple as a card game or sports, And so I want to tie that all back to, growing up in this barrio spot where there's a lot of gang culture and things like that. How did, and you being a nerd as well, is that what kind of drove you away from being a part of this gang culture, and then how you were able to then, pursue sports at the highest level?
Yep. That's a great question, man. It's funny. My tata, who was my father figure in life, grandfather in Spanish, he was like a very militaristic, ex. He was the first Hispanic police commissioner for South Central Tucson. He was also the first Hispanic man to be in the Unified School District down there.
Wow.
So like a very self-started guy, like, was one of the oldest of 16 kids, born in Texas, raised in Nebraska, like kind of farm country boy, right? Hispanic, went to the military. Then he was in Korea, then stationed at Davis Monthan Air Force Base in Tucson. And then he met my Nana. They fell in love and had 5 kids. And he was like my father figure growing up, but I got him when he was softer as he was older. So, our relationship is a lot different than his relationship with his actual sons, right? And he was a hard ass on me, but also I think because people knew who my grandfather was, I wasn't really sucked into that gang culture. I had a lot of friends, honestly, that were in gangs because you just grow up around it. You don't even really think about it when you grow up in it. It's just like, Brenton's brother, like, wears blue all the time.
Yeah.
And he hangs all the other dudes that wear blue. So like, they're part of this gang,
Right.
But I never felt unsafe. It's interesting because when you grow up in that, obviously there's danger, but I never felt like, I honestly felt safer in those environments than I do walking in places I don't know, because it's interesting. Like, it's still like a culture, a community to an extent, right? And I'm not condoning what like shit went on, I think, at that level, obviously.
Right.
But I think I never got sucked into it because I like you said, I had so many interests. I was always busy. It was either like athletics. I played on the chess team when I was a kid. Like, I went to these card games a lot. Warhammer 40K was something I got into when I was a kid too. I couldn't afford like all the models, but I was super nerdy like that. I loved to, like, I would like draw and write my own comics. So I do that. I was really into like drawing and painting. And I think just being busy all the time, sport really helped because I think sport gave me, I didn't grow up with any brothers and sisters, only child. Sport gave me like a family outside of my family. I started to make deeper connections. particularly when I had like a good coach that believed in me, you know, that really impacted me. I think I was really blessed to have some incredible public school teachers that honestly changed my life. Because for a long time, even though all my family is like educators, I really didn't think I had anything to offer the world outside of my athletic ability, you know? And it really wasn't until I was in like late stages of middle school and high school where I had teachers that were like, hey, you know, just so you know, you could offer the world a lot more than just hitting a ball with a stick if you want to.
Wow.
You know? And I started believing myself and actually like studying, you know,
Right.
I don't remember actually studying until I was like in 7th grade.
Yeah.
Like I went to Catholic school 1st through 6th. I seriously don't remember like studying. I read the Bible like 6 times backwards, forwards, you know, had nuns as teachers and I learned, but I don't remember actually applying myself until I was in middle school when I went to public school. And then it was like, my eyes were open because there was like arts, music, like all these different types of cliques of kids that would come in and I would like want to be friends with all of them. Because I thought everything was pretty cool.
Yeah.
You know? So yeah.
Very interesting. Yeah, no, definitely. I think that's a very important part about the human experience that we all have is that sense of community where no matter what, you know, area, genre, you know, background that you come from, because I myself have also grown up in that same type of culture. You know, a lot of my friends that I grew up with, they eventually, you know, either joined the gang or, you know, joined the crew.
Right.
And for us, what that meant, that crew culture was like, you're just down to ride for each other. Like you're just there for each other, but you're not doing all of the craziness that these, you know, these gangs are, that they are doing. And for me, it really did give that sense of community for so long. You know what I mean? Like that sense of brotherhood, that sense of community, and just being, like I said, down for each other. And I think at the same time, though, it created almost this inhibiting factor when it came to like performing at an extremely high level, because a lot of the people that I grew up with, they stay in the same sphere of influence. They stay within the same circle, the same proximity. Yeah. And it's very hard to then step out of that proximity, and you almost form this sense of anxiety and panic as you start to, you know, grow out of this community, because like imposter syndrome in a sense, you know what I mean? How am I really supposed to be stepping into these rooms with, you know, this former athlete, you know, this former X, Y, and Z, you know what I mean? When I'm like this small kid, you know, small town kid from Mira Mesa, you know what I mean? And for me, like I even sacrificed one of my favorite things growing up, which was tennis. You know, I played tennis from 7 to 13 years old because my dad was a tennis coach. And he was also the American Tennis Association president. And so he would be, you know, throwing, you know, tennis events and things like that, tennis tournaments. And we would be going, you know, to and from different tennis tournaments out in like Long Beach, LA, wherever it may be. Like we would be, you know, flying all over the place, you know, to play tennis tournaments and things like that. So I was a really good junior, but a part of being with this culture, like it was the girly sport, right? You know what I mean? Like, let's play basketball, let's play football, let's do track, let's go do other things. And not to talk too much on these other things, but yeah, it really kind of pushed me back from like performing at this highest level. And it really wasn't until like I started to kind of give myself that space. You know what I mean? I had to kind of like distance in a way, you know what I mean, for a season to be able to really focus in on my disciplines and myself and really who I sought myself to be. Was that the same case for you?
I think so in a lot of ways. You know, it's interesting how you like kind of talked about like you can stay stuck, right? I mean, there's so many reasons that lead to that in an individual. You know, it could be chance because you know, didn't meet a person that maybe would have inspired you or I to believe in ourselves and to sort of leave that bubble, you know? And I think that there's a fine line, right? Because there's this beauty of building community. But then if you become apathetic or complacent within that community, you stop growing on some, and then you only exist within that community. You know, for me, I've had periods of life where I'm like in a community, and then something happens, like, you know, a trauma or a breakup or, you know, some sort of thing that really motivates me to look for more or grow. And then I kind of expand that community and it gets bigger a little bit, right? And because there's times we need a smaller community, even just ourselves alone to like heal, to focus, to be more of a specialist. And then we have to go back into the world, build more friendships, build more relationships, grow the community and become, you know, a generalist again, right?
Right.
And I think the most, I don't know, like I use success in terms of like the people that have the healthiest relationships and have thriving relationships versus
Right.
like this person has a bunch of money.
Mm.
And, I think the healthiest people in that respect have a very good balance of spending time alone and working on themselves, and then also going into new community and pushing themselves to open up, to think different, right? To continue to sort of, push that edge. And that's always been what I've sought,
Yeah.
even in like actual romantic relationships. Like I want someone that challenges me, I want someone that like, asks me to think, asks me to feel deeper.
Right.
Those are the dynamics I thrive in. And honestly, those are the friendships that I thrive in too. And it's just, it's interesting when I look back at my own timeline, when like I got to a certain point, I'm like, oh, there's no way I can like, have a more open mind or think, more expansive than that. And then like 5 years down the road, it's like, wow, I actually didn't know what I was talking about in a lot of ways. And
Right.
And now it's like the more I know, and perhaps this is like what wisdom actually turns into, the less I believe I know about something. Does that make sense?
No, yeah, 100%.
Yeah.
No, I'm definitely tracking, for myself, especially on my own journey, and really my walk with faith for myself. You know that I'm big on my faith. And so for me, it was like God was telling me that I needed to kind of create this like moment of uncomfortability, and take this big leap moment. So for me, it was, the timeline was, I was a project manager at a Fortune 500 financial company. And let me just pause there real quick, because I started at this company because of the relationships that I had with my teachers in college. I was an entrepreneur before that for about 4 years, didn't work for anyone. Mm-hmm. And so at that moment, I took that job because my daughter was on the way, right? And my teacher at that time, his name was Professor Menifee, Texas boy. He had instructed us that we all had a bigger calling on our life. And for him, it was a writing class. And so he wanted everyone to become writers. Mm-hmm. And so it was really through his encouragement that I ended up like him, plus my brother being like a great strategist and telling me like, investments, financial literacy, business, because you had all these side hustles and stuff, but you never took the big leap. That, and then also my relationship with God, and then also my wife, which was my girlfriend at the time, all really just instilling all of that confidence and instruction to go and take this big leap moment. So I left this project manager job. I went straight to Barnes and Nobles. I bought How to Start a Podcast, How to Build a Personal Brand for Dummies. I bought these exact microphones 2 weeks later, an audio interface, like a Focusrite audio interface, using my MacBook Pro and everything. And I'm like, yeah, I'm trying to get going on this podcast, this business podcast that I want to start. People are telling me, yeah, they know that you're good with business. They know that you're good with finances. You know how to invest. You know how to do this and that. But you never took the big leap moment. And so I was sitting there in my room one night and I'm looking at this envelope on the door that me and my wife, girlfriend at the time, had written on it. And it was a menu for a restaurant for Chamorro food. My background's, Black and Chamorro. Mm-hmm. And so we always, me and Steph had always thought to start this Chamorro restaurant. And like time of prayer too, like this is a month after quitting my job now. I'm just sitting there. I look at this envelope and I'm like, it was like a Holy Spirit moment on me. Like, start here, right? And so I take this big leap moment. I open the restaurant, go through a whole bunch of, jumps and hurdles to, start this restaurant. And here we are 5 years later, right? At the studio, because of, for me, it's that obedience and that discipline to stay obedient and honorable to the things that God called me into, but also like taking that big leap moment to like say this sacrifice right here, like for this moment, yeah, it doesn't feel good and you don't really know what you're walking into. Mm-hmm. But once you take that big leap moment into what you're really called to be into, like it's going to continue to open doors for you. And that's really what Keys to the City is really about, is like, I'm really trying to encourage, this next generation to take that big leap moment. Yeah. Whatever you're really called into, whatever gift that you have, whatever unique assignment that God has on your life, like you can do it. Mm-hmm. And he wants you to do it. That's what you're actually designed to go and do, and to continue to go and make impact in the community through that gift. Yeah. And continue to be a light in your community. Yeah. And so for you, it's like, yeah, you could have continued to do sports, but maybe the sports and hitting the ball with the stick wasn't necessarily the thing that like created the most impact and influence for the community and for more than yourself, right? So there's a verse in scripture where it says, seek first the interests of others before yourself. I believe it's Philippians 2:3. And for me, that's really a part of why I think a lot of people become extremely successful. It's a very biblical principle to me that, like, if you're seeking first the interests of others before yourself, and then also Matthew 6:33, which is seek first the kingdom and his righteousness, and all these things will be added to it. Like, when you pair those things to do these things through your gift, I really feel like that creates like the most impact, maximum output with what you're doing. And so for you now, you know, getting into therapy and counseling rather, and coaching, you know, how have you kind of seen, you know, seeking the interests of others, you know, start to really take form and impact and mold, you know, this next stage of life for yourself?
Dude, that's a beautiful question. Let me start off with like sharing this story about, because you talked about kind of togetherness with that scripture quote, and I, or, you know, serving other people, right? To serve yourself. And when I was running full time, and, you know, ultra running is a very monotonous sport. Like, the way to train to be a pro in that sport is you just spend a lot of alone time running in the mountains if you're training for that, right?
Yeah.
And so it's a very isolating sport. You know, you can train with other pro runners, but you're spending a lot of alone time, you know. And maybe at the height of my career in that particular sport, you know, you can get very lonely because you're just focusing on this one goal. Let's say you train for this big race somewhere, you don't run well, you don't get that endorphin high of like performing, so you have to go back and just beat your body up again and again, right? And I felt very disconnected. And I would spend a lot of holidays alone in Flagstaff. I was like, you know, single, was in a relationship at the time, didn't travel back down to Tucson to see my family. And I remember one Thanksgiving, I need to do something. So I made a bunch of like bean and rice burritos, and I decided to go pass them out to homeless people in Flagstaff. And around that time, it's right before it gets cold in Flag, so people are still sleeping outside, and we have, you know, decent sized homeless population,
right?
Or unsheltered population. And I'd go out and I passed them to a bunch of people. And I mean, Flagstaff is a small town, so like, you recognize people you see all over the place, you know?
Right.
So a lot of the guys and girls are out, you know, they recognized me, I shook their hands, had conversations with them. And immediately I didn't feel lonely for like 2 or 3 weeks after, you know? And it's interesting because when I think of like spirituality, I was raised Catholic. And I had about probably 7-8 years from my late teens to my mid 20s that I would consider myself agnostic. It's like, well, I don't know what to believe in. So instead of saying I'm atheist, which is the same thing as saying something does exist, I'm just going to like
believe in some higher power.
Yeah. And just like, I don't know, you know, right. And then, you know, I think through experiencing loneliness and depression and relationships that didn't work out, and, you know, just going to therapy and seeing my own childhood trauma and trying to, you know, understand that. I promise this relates back to togetherness. Like, I understood that, like, you know, spirituality can mean different things to human beings, but the point is it's the glue that brings us together. And once we lose sight of that, it's really hard to see that, you know. So we sort of isolate ourselves in our own thinking a lot, and we forget that feeling is part of human experience, right? And true spirit is really like the feeling part of it, you know. I can sit in a room with someone and feel the energy, you know. We can't explain that scientifically, but we know something's there, you know. The same thing that happens when you fall in love, right? It's like science can explain what's going on in our brain and the dopamine that's released and serotonin and norepinephrine and all these things, but like why it's existing, we're not going to explain, right? And to me, that's part of the spirit. And so, you know, for us growing up, a lot of times the way to get together with people was to congregate, was to go to mass or to go to synagogue or to go to mosque and to offer up and to be with people and to celebrate life, right? And that, like we spoke off air, that's kind of going downhill, right? But I think there's this resurgence, especially when we look at depression rates, anxiety rates, you know, relationships, all these things that are getting harder to stay away from or to sustain. We're missing that place to go congregate, right? And it doesn't have to be a church for you, right? But I think the way to do that is to go and serve others, you know? And I think for me, like in, you know, even dealing with chronic pain with my arm injuries and all these surgeries and sort of having my body completely changed from what it was, the days I feel my best is when I'm helping others. And that's every single time, you know? And so when I'm not feeling well, like personally, if I can just get myself out of that mindset and go and like help someone else that's struggling, and this is honestly why I got into counseling, I feel better. Like I do. There is a transaction that happens where, you know, I just feel better. And it's
Yeah.
it's the same reason why we asked, like, my friend, I have this friend I grew up with, Cameron. He grew up Buddhist, and we talked about altruism, the idea of altruism one day when we were working. This was like when I was like 20 years old. We were both climbers, and I asked him. He's like, I don't believe in altruism, even though he was Buddhist, and it's a cornerstone of Buddhism. And I'm like, why don't you? He's like, well, like, we'll put it this way: if I'm walking down the street and I see a person, that doesn't have any food, and I offer them a banana, and the person takes the banana, and they're fed for a day or something. He's like, I am still getting something out of that. Like, I'm measuring like that. I'm giving this person something to sustain themselves, and that makes me feel better. He's like, there's nothing wrong with that. But truly, like, in his eye, the reason why altruism doesn't exist is because we have to be able to judge, to be able to feel whether something's positive or not. It's the same reason why you wouldn't go up to that person and like hit them across the face, right?
Right.
That doesn't make you feel good.
Right.
And when he explained it to me like that, it just made a lot of sense. So I'm like, yeah, there is a reciprocation on everything we're doing, right? It's like, if I go do something when the camera's off and it makes me feel bad, like, I know that, like, that literally, it's that action, whatever I behaved in, that's the result, right? And so preemptively, I can tell myself, no, I don't want to engage in those behaviors because I know I'm not going to feel bad. And that is like that relates to addictive mindset and how we sort of get addicted to things, whether they're good or bad for us,
Right.
But yeah, just to go back to the point of the story is like, community, congregation, like, however that works for you. If you feel isolated, if you feel like, you are alone in any way, that I would start walking towards that, and that's really the impetus of like my work with people, whether it's if they're single or couples, is to get back to building community within inside ourselves, with ourselves deeply, and then with other people that truly want to mirror that aren't just looking to take.
Right. 100%, man. I always go back and think of the story of the paralytic man, if you're familiar with the story. So there's a story in Mark 2 where there's a paralytic man, and his friends end up bringing him through a crowd to go and see Jesus. And because of the friends' faith of bringing this paralytic man through to him, and the paralytic man didn't even ask for help, didn't even say like, save me or help me, you know what I mean? It was his friends begging and crying and calling on to God or calling on to Jesus, right? That Jesus says that's why the man was healed. That's why he was healed. And so to me, it always ties back to that sense of community, right? So because of your friend's faith, because of the sphere of influence that you surround yourself with, because of the proximity that you place within yourself, and really there's a Greek word that comes to play, which is oikos. I actually gave this out to Golden as well, is this word means household. And so this household that comes together, this congregation that comes together behind you, these are people that God then puts in place within your life that, you're able to then go and serve one another and help to continue to expand culture and community. And really, like you said, it goes beyond yourself. You know what I mean? It's really about the community as a whole, which in our case as believers is the kingdom, is the church. And I wanted to touch base on that as well real quick, is like a lot of people, and I'm also speaking to like the younger generations as well, is that because there's such a fast growing rate of like people not even wanting to believe in anything at all, like no religion at all or anything. And I don't believe in religion per se. I believe in having a relationship with God. Yeah. There's a very distinct notion within the church where it's not necessarily, when you believe that it's a relationship with God, that it's not necessarily for church walls. I grew up Catholic myself, right? And gotten confirmed and everything. I went to CCD class and all that stuff, like growing up. And within that same year, literally like I believe it was 3 or 4 months after that, that I got confirmed within the Catholic Church, is when I like finally realized like, it's not even about tradition. It's not even really about religion, anything like that. It's about having a personal relationship with God, and that's your sense of community, because within that you have the quote unquote church, which is, like I said, beyond the 4 walls of a church building. And a lot of people will tend to then like want to say like, well, why not have like the bling and glamour of having like this fancy church that you see, you know what I mean? I grew up in a very like big Catholic church, you know what I mean? And I think a lot of Catholic churches tend to like, you know, express themselves through like, you know, having this large amounts of wealth and then proclaiming it to be God through it. And almost creating a sense of like false idol and worship just within that. And people then don't realize the importance of like that stripped down relationship that you have with what I believe to be the creator of all of it. Right. And so I just wanted to share on that, you know what I mean? That really, like I said, it's the church. It goes beyond the four walls. It's about the people, the body of the church that make up the church. And then two, the paralytic man that was able to be healed, fully healed. He was able to walk and everything like that. Many witnesses to that. And them claiming that it to be their friend's faith. You know what I mean? It was the friends that brought him through to their believing that Jesus was going to be able to do that healing. And so, yeah, for me, it's like, it's all of that.
I agree with you. It's interesting because, you know, I think when we talk about religion in like a religiosity context, there's a huge human component to that, right? And when we're in charge of things, we tend to manipulate them a little bit to get a certain outcome, right? And you look at history, like religion has been used to start wars or to take land or do these other things, but that is not the spirit context of the religion, right? That's the human part of the religion. And we could take anything and make it better, or we can make it worse, right? But what you're speaking of is, again, if we can call it any word you want, like call it God, call it spirit, you know, but it's that glue, it's that fabric that sort of interweaves life and things that we can even perceive, right? But that we feel. And I think that there's, for me, like to take it, like say, let's take out the marketing, like the human aspect of the business of religion. Like I think someone has to find spirit on their own, right? And I don't think I can ever like call someone into it. It's like they have to want to walk into it. It's the same thing when I'm in a counseling setting and I'm like, look, if you're in a relationship with someone and you have these character things about them that you want them to change, and only if they were to change those things, then they'd be lovable to you. They have to want to change those on their own. Right? If they're changing them for you, they're not doing it because they truly believe that they need to change. Right? And that's the same thing with spirit. Like I was not ready for 10 years. I had to go through my early teens of rebellion and push it away and be like, no, this is traumatic. Like there's persecution, there's this here. And then coming full circle and be like, you know what? I don't want to feel alone anymore. Like I want to be connected to other things. I'm going to like make what spirit is to me. Right. And have ritual. I think ritual is a big thing, right? Practicing ritual, and prayer is part of that ritual for a lot of people. You know, I think a lot of people lose their way because they're like, what am I praying to? Who am I praying to? I'm like, it's more about, you have to feel it in here, you know, it's less about like,
it's an introspective thing.
Exactly. Yeah. And I think it's really hard for, and we're in the world of TikTok and YouTube and social media. It's like, well, I want that instant gratification. I want to hit Amazon Prime and get it tomorrow. I'm like, that's really not how this works. This is a practice that it builds resiliency and love and joy over time if you keep giving into it, you know? And it helps, like, honestly, like if we're talking about depression, anxiety, and these things that really do plague a society, particularly in the Western culture, like this is where the antidote is, you know, and it helps you build relationships. It helps you see yourself in a more kind light, no matter what you've been through. It helps you see others in a more compassionate light, no matter what they've done and what they've been through, you know? And to me, it's particularly interesting as someone who's dealt with depression a lot in my younger life and still does, even with the injuries that I have. It's like when I'm only focused on myself, I feel more alone. When I'm focused on others and connecting with others, I can't be alone. You know,
what are the core values that you have in place that kind of get you rooted and grounded into the things that you step into? So whether it be, you know, this high performing ultra marathon running athlete, you know, this next professional #1 pickleball player journey that you're looking to be.
No, just kidding. Don't throw that out. I'm gonna get some heat. DJ's gonna make you regret that comment.
Or like, you know, like as the best counselor that you can be. You know, I think there's always a sense of this sense of bringing together this community within high level producers. Like they're always going to attract the next high level producer. But what are the kind of core values or keys to success that, you know, kind of get you to this place within yourself? And
That's a really good question. I think for me, one thing that particularly stands out is just authenticity, right? And I think it's hard to be fully you in all different types of scenarios around different people, whether they're well-known famous person or some random person on the street that you might only have one conversation with. And particularly for me, like that, it's really important. You know, I want to be the same person in every part of my life, you know, whether there are cameras in my face or not. And, you know, also I think personal accountability, like when I have made mistakes, when I have done things that have hurt others or done things that are wrong, like being accountable and understanding why they happen and learning how to change, you know. I think people that are like the best counselors, if we want to stick to the counseling and therapy, are the ones that have been through trauma and figured out how to live with it and not necessarily fully heal from it, because I don't think it's ever a done thing, but get to a point where they have forgiven themselves, forgiven someone else, can show compassion in all directions, you know. And that's particularly hard when we fall short, right, as men or as women. And so I think authenticity, like personal accountability, and then the third one I would say is self-awareness, you know, like knowing what I'm doing in the presence of others and how I'm affecting other people. You know, I know, particularly for me dealing with the chronic pain, the injury, like chronic pain affects your brain in a way where it changes your personality. So it starts to suck the life out of you, you know, because you get up every day and you're like, man, this is how my life's going to be. It's sort of like being in a jail cell in your own body. And you have to start to retrain your brain on how to accept, you know, how to accept that feeling every day, but also still be able to share some space and hold some space for joy and positivity, you know? And that's been really interesting. That's been harder than any ultra marathon I've ever trained for, you know, because it's continuous. It's 24 days,
7,
you know, 24/7, right?
Yeah.
I mean, it really, ultras kind of prepared me for it a little bit because, you know, really it's a very masochistic way to suffer. But when you're in pain that way, you really have to be very aware of what affects your energy and how you affect others, right? Because like before I was in pain, I could like really, you know, if I had a good day, I was having a good day. Like nothing else is going to get in the way of that. Whereas now I can be having a good day and like, oh man, my arm's hurting, you know, and that can just suck you into a completely different way of thinking. And I have to almost be aware of how that's affecting who I'm showing up as. Yeah. And really start to, you know, just give myself a little more love and compassion in that area and know like, hey, if you're feeling pain, you know, sit with it, like, or do something to mitigate it and then return back to the world versus like try to push through it. Whereas before I had that injury, it would be like, I didn't even have to think about it. I could just go all day and have conversations, podcast guests, whatever, you know? Right. So I guess that in that way, it's that part has humbled me, made me more self-aware because you can't run away from it. Gotcha. So authenticity and accountability and then self-awareness are the core values and pillars that you kind of stand on. Yeah. Talk to me a little bit about the tools of preparation that you put in place to make yourself then hold yourself accountable to these things. That's a good follow-up question. I mean, for me, it's outcomes, you know, like when I know I'm not behaving in ways that it's congruent with the character or the man I want to be, I know that I feel like more shame, or I'll feel, you know, like, hey, this is not what I want to be doing. This isn't the relationship I want to be engaging in. This isn't who I want to be acting like in a relationship, whether it's a friendship or romantic relationship or whatever. I'm always talking about things in terms of relating because that's what we're doing, relating to ourselves, relating to others, whether it's through business, whether it's through spirit, whatever, you know? And so for me, like the ways to gauge it, I really look to the people that I'm surrounding myself with, you know? If I'm doing this in a way that feels healthy, like I feel seen, I feel loved, I feel, you know, good around the people I'm with. I don't feel judged. I don't feel like I'm trying to be controlled. And I don't feel like I'm doing those things to others either, right? I'm here, like I can lift someone else up while not like devaluing my own self-worth, right? And I think that's hard to learn until you get to a certain point, because I think at a certain level, we all want to be like the best at something, you know? And then it's particularly being a type A, so hyper competitive individual. But like when you let go of that just a little bit, I think it allows you to step into a role that helps other people get there. You know, and I think maybe that's part of like going from the, you know, person that's striving to sort of growing into what I'd like to think is like an elder, you know? Because in my mind, like, especially where I'm at athletically, like I would much rather like take a coaching position than like a, you know, pursuit position for like a, like being a pro in anything. Right. Yeah. And it's interesting now, like I was talking to DJ about this on his show. Like one of the things I'd love to do is be like a NCAA pickleball coach when it becomes an NCAA sport, because particularly like, not only do I love that sport, but it's also working with people between 18 to 23 years old is huge, because rarely does a college coach like care about what's going on in their personal lives, what's going on in their family lives. Like, they're just starting to date. They might just start to sleep with people. Like, how does this all affect you as an athlete, as a human being? Like, I don't just want to care about your results on the court. I want you to walk away from this experience being a better, more functional human being that believes in yourself. So that way it's not just about taking this training to another pickleball court after you graduate. It's about like knowing how to just human in a better way, you know? And caring about people, like legitimately caring about people.
No, for sure. For sure. So for me, what I'm getting from this is like, you need to, the tools of preparation that you need to put in place is really going deep into this place of like introspection, realizing that you need this sense of community. You need to continue to put yourself in uncomfortable positions, or then they become comfortable because you start to realize like, oh, this is good for me. And then also the ability to be able to empathize is kind of what I'm hearing from you as well.
Summarize it well. The one thing I would add is know that you are wrong more times than you're not. And so I think a lot of times we assume that we're right and we know, and I think it's better to like really try to understand our internal biases too, right? I mean that, and those things exist for a reason. They exist to protect us. And sometimes we do hit, the thing on the nose, and we are correct in a certain situation. But for me, like, it was really hard for me to let go of like the addiction of being right all the time, because when you're in that addiction, it's hard to grow.
Ooh.
It really is hard to grow because, we look at admitting wrongness as a failure in society, when really anyone that's done anything like successful, you have to be able to get to that point.
No, you're speaking right to me right now. I've always had that. I didn't realize it for myself, but I've always carried that spirit of addiction, in the ability to or the addiction to always want to be right, and always want to have the most wisdom in the room, always want to have the most knowledge, especially being 28 and, starting the restaurant at 23 and, having these businesses since 17 years old and things like that. Like, people would always kind of lean into me for that type of knowledge, and then also want to always come to me for advice and help. Growing up through high school, that was going to be my first, gig was going to be a psychologist. I wanted to be a psychologist and be able to help people with their personal problems, because people were coming to me all the time for advice. Then as I started to get good with investments and good with business, and, I was swing trading and things like that early on, since 18, and, generated six figures, as a, young man and things like that. And that's what it was able to then get me started with smacking, you know what I mean? And being able to take that leap there. I had always kind of had this habit and characteristic to myself of wanting to be right in that sense. And then that formed into let me be a financial advisor, so then I can then help them with their finances and their financial problems, you know what I mean? And then now it's I'm making this transition now to where it's okay, I'm just here to activate and multiply people in and through their gift. And so for me now, it's a more selfless position of and realizing I don't necessarily have to be right in this sense. It was literally 3 months ago, February 10th to be exact, of 2024, where I realized for the first time that I had a gambling addiction. Because I always wanted to be right, it didn't matter how much money I won. It didn't matter how much money I lost. It was I had to be right. And it didn't matter if I lost 10 games in a row, I needed to get that one. You know what I mean? And that's when I started to really have that introspective moment, and then also the intuitive moment, and God really just coming into that space that night. I remember just bawling in my bedroom and realizing that this wasn't even remotely close to an investment anymore. It wasn't a quicker route of investment. It was no, you're just straight up gambling. You're taking just an extreme amount of risk to very little reward ratio for the things that you have set for yourself. And it really wasn't until I sacrificed that side of me and like surrendered it to God, where I was like, yo, like it was the most liberating experience to be able to be delivered from that spirit of addiction and break those chains off, because now here I am like 3 months later and I'm like walking into doors that I never imagined. You know, we just opened the lab March 23rd.
Wow.
And from that point, you know, like I said, doors have just been crashing wide open. We got like people like DJ in here that, you know, very high performer, found us quote unquote out of the blue. Like I really, you know, that to me, that was like a very divine appointment from God. Like, man, because we had no real sense of direction as to like where income was really going to be coming in for this place. It was like, oh yeah, this is just a creative zone, you know, a free zone. The Mera Kairos Lab actually stands for 2 Greek words put together. Mera comes from the Greek word meraki, which means to put your love, soul, and creativity into something. Kairos means the most opportune time, or God time, divine time. And then the lab is the Lord's art block. So for me and Steph, it was really a space for us to, quote unquote, the most opportune time to put your love, soul, and creativity into the Lord's art block. So it's an opportunity for us to go and like do the creative things that we love and do good work unto the Lord. But then it's also like, because we're, you know, really involved in just showing love to whomever, whether you're a believer or not, like we love you and we care for you, and we want you to continue to pour into your gift ultimately. And so now it's created this space for people to then come and do their own things and to really pour into and invest into their gift. And like I said, it was breaking that spirit of addiction that I really like got this boom, like the chasm was just like busted wide open. You know what I mean? And so, yeah, it to me, you kind of have to go through those moments of trauma. Biblical term would be like refiner's fire. A lot of people will, in the church especially, will start to place blame on quote unquote the enemy or something like that, versus taking accountability for themselves and or looking at God. You know, God will turn up that fire on your life to realize how much more you actually need him. To realize how much more you actually need to spend time to intertwine yourself with him, so that he can set you on a right path. He can set you on a straight and narrow path to really the thing that he wants you to be able to do. So whether that was through your injuries in sports, to really like get you that push, or whether it was separating you from that community of like former gang culture, you know, in the barrios and things like that. Now you're here. You know what I mean? And what are you going to continue to do and lean into and put your weight on to continue to be the best version of yourself while you're here, but also to continue to do the good work that you're called into doing? Yeah.
Amen, brother. I appreciate you sharing that about the personal addiction story. I think so few people realize that, like, as human beings, that's how our brain works. Like everyone has an addiction pattern, but it might proliferate in different ways. You know, so people look at addiction in terms of like alcoholism, you know, drugs like opioids or, you know, cocaine or things like that, or marijuana, right? But we're addicted to things like caffeine, right? We're addicted to things like relationships. We can be addicted to things like porn. You know, there's a lot of things like that. We can be addicted to unhealthy patterns of thinking. You know, we can be addicted to victimizing ourselves. Right. And I think really part of like self-growth and journey is like what you went through is one day you're just like, I am tired of this because it's not making me feel good anymore. The investment has very little ROI for me spiritually or physically or emotionally. And you have to let it go. No one can do that for you. Like that process of letting that go, whether it's like cold turkey, like that's how I deal with things. I just have to stop it immediately. But other people, it's more gradual. But however that process is to you, like I think part of letting go is really connecting with spirit. And again, that could manifest in so many different ways. Like I want to, you know, be open with people, like however you want to do that, whether it's nature, whether it's, you know, whatever, but like connecting with spirit in some way, I think is really the only way. And it's why AA is so successful, you know, because it connects you with the higher power, you know, it's your choice, right? Like what do you want to believe in? But at some point you have to sort of take that weight off your shoulders and sit it next to you in order to really let go of it, right? Because when we continue to embody or just internalize that, you continue to be the addict, right?
Mm-hmm.
And you can't beat the addiction. And once you separate those two things, I think spirit plays a huge role in that. Like you're saying, you can just really change the way you're existing in life, you know? And I think it's a constant battle. I don't know if it ever just is a switch that turns off, but it gets easier the more time you stay separated from it, you know? And then you don't even recognize that version of yourself because you're different.
Yeah, no, definitely. I think that through my lens of faith and things like that is like you start to then grow the desires and the wants, not only of like the things that you have internally, but like tapping into this supernatural power, which is, you know, like God in spirit form. And so you're able to like then grasp this sense of knowledge and wisdom of like, okay, what is God really asking of me to do in this moment? You know what I mean? And how do I continue to maintain integrity and be intentional and disciplined to and honorable to the things that he really wants me to do? Because like you said, like being authentic to it, you know what I mean? That's very good. It's very enriching because that's really what Smackin' is really rooted on too, is like, we want you to know that like, as soon as you walk in, you're forming an authentic relationship with the customer first and foremost, and then authentic food, you know what I mean? And then the authentic culture that we have and hospitality that we have, you know, behind us. That's what the A in Smackin' stands for. So like, you've already heard the acronym with the MK Lab, but then also Smackin' is an acronym as well. I'm a very acronym person. Yeah. And so Smackin' is like Pseudo Mesa Authentic Chamorro Kitchen and Guamanian and Grill. And it's really just paying homage to my grandma, my late grandma and grandfather on my Pseudo Mesa side. And how do we continue to push forward the authenticity within, you know, our culture and continue to lay those roots for, you know, more and more people, whether you're a part of the Chamorro culture or whether you're not. But yeah, it's really just having that authenticity, like you said, and like I said, continue to be intentional, continue to be disciplined to the things that really ultimately God in spirit form calls you into. Yeah. Right. Yep. Love it. Yeah, man. Is there anything that you wanted to ask me?
Oh, dude, I have so many questions. I mean, honestly, like being a restaurateur, like that's not an easy thing. You know, I think it's awesome because you grew up in that culture to know about that food, but you know, it's not people like there's so many people start restaurants and aren't successful, right? They they don't make it past a year or two, you know, especially with rent prices in San Diego. I mean, take me through that process because I'm so curious. Like, what made you guys want to start that? You know, was that always a plan, or was there a story that kind of was like, all right, we should do this? You know, there's a chance to be successful here.
Yeah. So, there's a very long story to this, but to keep it short, is we had this envelope, like I was talking about at the beginning of the pod, that we had written up about 2 years. It was hanging in my bedroom, taped to the door, and every day I would look at this. And we said that we were going to do it, you know, eventually down the road, but like I said earlier, when I hit that like big leap moment and like the Holy Spirit, like just like I looked at that envelope that night and I was like, boom. It was like clear as day, like almost an audible voice that was like, start here. Right. And so when I had already quit the job, you know, my firstborn was already on the way in December, and I had stopped. I pushed the podcast aside in November of 2018. So by November of 2018 is when like I started to form like, okay, we're going to start here. And my daughter was born December 30th of 2018. So from November to June 28th, 2019 is when like we finally launched the restaurant and all of the planning in between. But it came from like already having this seed of like, okay, we're going to do this. We didn't necessarily know it was going to happen within like the first 2 years of our relationship and stuff, and with a newborn on the way.
Right. It's wild.
Yeah, it was extremely wild, but we were like, yeah, God called us to like start here. And so we were like, okay, let's start here. Yep. And from that point, you know, I just went to town on like my goals. I have a very strategic and disciplined approach to how I form goals, using almost like a SMART goals type platform, where I'm able to like really be specific and measurable to the things that I'm trying to target. And I give them an exact time frame. And whether I hit it on the exact time frame or not, it's just staying disciplined to like knock out all of these smaller measurable goals and like smaller wins to get along to the bigger goal. And so that's what I was doing that entire time from like November even in the hospital in labor, I had my laptop with me writing the business plan because that was like staying on goal, staying on the system. And then, that's essentially how it kind of started. And then the deeper kind of meanings behind it, as well as like giving a sense of culture, putting a sense of cultural representation for the Chamorro culture, because we only have about 4 restaurants here in San Diego that are Chamorro owned. Nothing in Orange County, nothing in LA, 3 in Vegas, so very small amount of Chamorro representation within entrepreneurship and business ownership, especially within restaurants. A lot of like blue collar white type community and culture behind that. And I really wanted to then encourage and impact the next generations of like aspiring entrepreneurs, whether you're Black, Chamorro, those are the marginalized communities that I come from. But then also, whether you're Hispanic, whatever, background that you really come from, to inspire those people to continue to go and take those big leaps as well.
Yep.
Absolutely.
Yeah. I love that. That's big for me too, man. Even within sport, like ultra running was primarily like very upper class, like white sort of elitist sport when I first got into it. And it's more diverse now. But when you're growing up in certain areas, you don't hear about running in the mountains. It's like, you got to get a ride out there, dude. It's like, how do you get out there? I grew up like, we play baseball, football, basketball, soccer to get out of the slum or get out of the ghetto. Right. And when I got into ultra running, like one thing that was really big on me, especially being Hispanic and growing up in the area I did, is like talk to other kids about running. You don't have to be a pro runner just to go out and enjoy the process of moving your body through nature, and I spent a lot of time on the Navajo reservation with a handful of friends, and we'll split time between the Navajo and Hopi reservations. Running is big in their cultures. Every morning, most people wake up, and if they're running, it's a spiritual experience. They run to the east. They run to the rise of the sun to sort of give grace, right? And there's there's this whole creation story in Navajo culture that I think is beautiful and quite eloquent. But it became a spiritual practice, to me in so many ways. And I think being able to share that with again, like you said, underrepresented communities. Like I feel that about pickleball too, a pickleball, even though it's accessible, it's still like a very elite on some levels because it's expensive to buy into, to get a paddle and stuff. Yeah. And when I hear people that are like getting, underprivileged communities into it, like it's awesome. There should be more people that are exposed because it's just such a fun sport. So I just want to commend you for saying that, because I think the only way that, we rise is we rise up together, and you sort of seeing that, and filling that need, for those marginalized communities you come from is big. More people need to be doing that.
Definitely, bro. Yeah, no, that's a part of like this next season that I'm in, really, ultimately, is like, because of, like I said, and I'm just continuing to beat this in, is like, being obedient and honorable to the things that God called me into, and using my gift of like knowing business, but it's like bigger than myself, right? Serving the interests of others before myself. So like smacking, yes, like it wasn't necessarily the main thing that I wanted to do. At that time, I actually wanted to go finish school, and then I was going to go to barber school and start my own barbershop. And I already had plans with another buddy of mine to go and do that. He ended up going to barber school that same time frame of me building out Smackin', and then now he works at a barbershop and is going to be actually launching his own barber studio sometime next year, I believe. Okay. But anywho, yeah, that was like my personal thing at the time, my personal goal at the time. And that's where I was like, I had to take this big leap moment where like God called me into, because it wasn't the thing that I really wanted to do. Like I had no intention of flipping chicken, especially because I didn't have necessarily the actual recipes. In our Chamorro culture, like it's all by taste. And so I grew up around my grandma only on the summers, 3 months at a time. And so I knew the taste. I never had an actual recipes, even though I say that we have like quote unquote generational recipes. It's really because I just know my grandma's cooking. And so, Smackin' was then that, and then, the MK Lab. And now here I am, like, getting into business coaching, kind of forming that personal brand, behind myself, and really the vision and mission that I'm on right now of, like I said, activating and multiplying people in and through their gift. And whether that come through the arts, whether that come through the restaurant, whether that come through, you starting your own podcast, and just really just giving these platforms. And then eventually I'm going to be starting like a venture capital, company and group, where we can all come together and then start to, give equity into the things that we, all believe in, and really want to push forward and align with. And so, that's kind of my next steps, my next journey, as it is right now, man. Yeah.
Beautiful, man. Well, it's a pleasure to spend some time with you, get to know you. And I'm just glad that, like this all worked out, right? You met me when I was on DJ show because he was using your space to record. We had a good conversation. Immediately I was like, yeah, I would love to come on and talk, could just feel the energy, you're a good human being doing good things, and happy to be a part of it.
I just want to also point that out to the viewers, is like, just continue to shoot the shot. Yeah. You know what I mean? Yeah. Like, don't be afraid. That's a part of the human experience. Like, whether you get accepted or rejected, like, just continue to do. Yeah. Just continue to do it. I actually put in a practice for myself when I do coach people, is like, it's about presenting offers, right? And how many offers are you going to be able to present? And so, like, I want you to just continue to go and search for as many no's as you can. Yeah. Because eventually someone's going to say yes.
Absolutely.
Right? Yep. And so here you are, we had one conversation. It was like maybe a 5 or 10 minute conversation, but now we were able to form this super deep and introspective conversation. I think we're on like an hour now, just being able to talk to each other. And you just need to be open and, like you said, self-aware of these type of situations and put yourself in positions to be able to do so. Yep. And whether you get accepted or rejected, be okay with it. Yep. Find joy and peace within it.
Yep. Learning how to deal with rejection is such a good thing to develop in so many facets of life, but then also say yes to more things. I think that's led me to, obviously you got to reserve your energy too. And once in a while you got to learn how to say no. But I think when I say yes to more things, I'm like, all right, look, we're having this conversation now that I wasn't expecting like 3 weeks ago before I met you, it's been brilliant.
Right. No, definitely, man. Yeah. I just want to leave you off with this. I already said it earlier, but I'm going to say it again, is Matthew 5:14. This is what Keys to the City is really built on, is Matthew 5:14 is, you are the light of the world. A city set on a hill cannot be hidden. And that's just a word of encouragement to just continue to pour into your gift, continue to invest into your gift and the call that God has on your life, and to continue to be salt and light in your community and really serve that purpose that you're really here for, and continue to, like we've been reiterating, is continue to seek first the interests of others, you know what I mean, before yourself. And, us as believers is like, seek first the kingdom and his righteousness. So that just means the entire body as a whole. How are you going to continue to make the impact within the whole human experience for people, and serving on your gift, and let God do the work. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Appreciate you having me, brother.
Yeah.
It's been a pleasure, man.
Appreciate you, man.
Yeah.
Peace.
Thank you.